Hola a todos, soy Pamela de Boss. En el último año y debido a la pandemia, han habido más de 3.800 crímenes de odio contra los asiáticos en Estados Unidos, siendo los chinos los más afectados, con un 42%. Recientemente pudimos hablar con coreanos estadounidenses acerca de este problema, y sus opiniones fueron bastante interesantes. Recuerda ver este video si aún no lo has hecho. El día de hoy hablaremos con los chinos estadounidenses viviendo en China para conocer más sobre sus opiniones al respecto y cómo es su experiencia comparado con Estados Unidos. ¿Nos ayudarán a entender un poco el sentimiento antiasiático que se vive en Estados Unidos? ¿Y sobre la opinión de los chinos al respecto? Vamos a averiguarlo.
Where are you from in the U.S. and why did you decide to come to China?
I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I decided to come to China because my parents immigrated from Guangzhou, and I wanted to understand them more.
I'm from Austin, Texas. I came to China. This is my second time. I came here for work. I am hoping to develop a relationship with China again.
From the San Francisco Bay Area, and I decided to come to China to learn Chinese.
I was born and raised in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Last time I was in the United States was November last year, so I actually went back in 2020 for Chinese New Year, and because of COVID, I was stuck there for almost 11 months before returning to China, so it was quite the experience.
What has it been like living in China as a Chinese American as opposed to living in the U.S. as a Chinese American?
I feel like in America, I feel more Chinese, but in China, I feel more American, if that makes sense. And I've definitely found it pretty easy to, find my tribe here and make friends.
I feel like the people accept me outwardly, like my outward appearance, but not culturally here. I would have different opinions, different perspectives. But if I just walk on the street, they won't think much, right? So back in the States, it's kind of like the opposite. I'm culturally accepted, but my outward appearance isn't accepted.
I could say I'm bicultural, so I understand Chinese culture as well as Western culture. I feel kind of okay here, but there are moments of times where, if you wanted to get into the workspace and you wanted to get into our day-to-day lives, there's definitely some sort of feeling of being an expat.
Just like what's going on right now, apparently Asians in America are getting a lot of hate. And obviously that's not what's going on in here. So you see the difference. It's here not only welcoming Asian Americans, but at the same time, all type people, white, black, everyone. So I think that's the difference I see.
It's safer here, for sure. So I noticed that kind of right off the bat. I think as a kid growing up in America, you don't really realize all the violence that's around until you go somewhere else. And then when you go back again, you're like, holy shit, I forgot. It's super dangerous here. I could get mugged.
Now, when you hear about the ongoing hate crimes against Asians in the U.S., how do you feel? How does that make you feel?
Definitely, I'm worried. My daughter's going to go back to school she'll be going to Boston in the fall for college, and I am really, really afraid that after having lived in China for so many years, going into the U.S. as an Asian American is going to be a shock, and I'm really scared for her, actually.
Oh man, I feel there's a lot of complicated emotions. First of all, I am worried about my own family. The attacks are often on elderly Asian people or slightly older people, especially women. And for example, my mother's, she's living there. She's going to be living there for most of her life. So, she could easily be one of these people who are attacked.
It really saddens me. I have a grandma who still lives in San Francisco, and she lives on her own, and she's quite old now. She's almost 80 years old, and it really worries me to see what's going on in the world, what's going on in the city actually, to a lot of these elderly people, and they have done absolutely nothing wrong. They've been in the States. They've been sort of when my grandma first came there, she worked, and I feel they pay taxes and everything. And the COVID has nothing to do with them, and yet they still have to. They have to go out in the streets worrying if they're going to be hurt or if there's some sort of hate crime that's going to happen to them.
There's been quite a bit of media coverage on this recently, and people are talking about this issue. So why do you think these crimes are still happening?
Because whenever things get extreme, the first thing that people do is find scapegoats. And whenever, well, let's just say this, like if me and you have a disagreement and we can't agree on anything, and it comes and becomes kind of heated, the first thing that happens is like, just, I guess you point to differences. I think it's human nature.
The white people's hate towards Asian people is is really just from their tradition, from their religion, from their whole culture. They've been doing things like this for last 400-500 years already, and they just change that and thought maybe it was wrong for like 50 years. It doesn't change. It's still in people's mind.
It's because we are taught to be quiet, to ignore all these discrimination and racial comments. And I think that's why people just keep doing it, because they don't think that they will pay up consequence for it.
In the current wave of hate crimes, have you experienced, or like have your families or anyone around you shared any stories about difficulties they have faced recently?
Yeah, so because my mother has always worked as a waitress at a Chinese restaurant, because a lot of people in our neighborhood currently, which is very white, didn't want to go eat at Chinese restaurants anymore, and so the restaurant actually closed, and my mom's unemployed now.
My mom goes shopping in New York, and I think lately, we have phone conversations pretty often, my mom and I, and lately she's been telling me that, people have been like glaring at her in the supermarket, maybe even being, explicitly rude to her, and that didn't really used to happen before. So it's very noticeable, but these are incidents that, people tend to brush aside and go like, okay, well, it wasn't direct violence, or it wasn't anything that I can report.
When it was during COVID and in the community where I live, we have these WeChat groups, and we would sometimes get notices in those groups, don't go to this grocery store, don't go to this shopping mall today. And actually, 2 of those locations were primarily very white, I want to say very white areas. And we assume it's because some sort of Asian hate or shaming was going on, and they wanted us to avoid it. It's a very strange feeling to not be able to feel safe in your own country or in your own home and where you live. It doesn't feel right, and especially for something you have no control over, your race or has no control over, and to have to deal with that is quite, it's not something I expected.
One friend who was in, what was that, Louisiana, New Orleans, she was spat on. So, and yeah, that's from what I know. I've heard from other people too, like in New York, there are a lot of different attacks and people moving out from the city. Because you hear about it in the news and you just kind of figure like, when is it going to happen to me or someone I know, not if. And so it kind of felt like I was waiting to hear a story from a friend. And then to hear it, it's like, oh shit, this is real.
Do you feel like in the US, a lot of Asian Americans get lumped into the same category? And is that a problem?
Yeah, I think they get lumped in the same category. Me being Asian, I feel it's fine. We are Asian, but there needs to be more knowledge and education on what being Asian means. There needs to be education on how many different nationalities fall under the Asian category?
I would say that sometimes people are just lazy. They don't really care. Asians are Asians. I'm just gonna group them together in a big group and I'm done with it, right? I don't really care. I don't really want to know more about you or your specific ethnicity or where you're from, what country you're from. You guys are all the same to me. And I get that a lot. Like, I actually get that a lot all the time. Like, oh yeah, you Japanese, you Koreans and Chinese, they're like, yeah, it's the same thing, right?
I would say that one thing though, I think we're overly harsh on countries like, say, the United States, because the fact is most large countries don't have to deal with integrating this level of diversity. And I think that if America and countries like it, like Australia, Canada, if they can find ways to navigate this and move forward, I think it's better for humanity overall, because I think that's the future. I think more diversity in all societies around the world, just like drift away from just giant monogroups. I think it's a challenge, like I said, I think it's just a challenge that countries like the US face more than other countries.
Supposedly a lot of these attacks are based on the anti-China sentiment in the US right now. From your experience, do you feel there's an anti-China sentiment in the US? Or do you think do you think the sentiment is like connecting towards hate crimes right now?
Yes, there's definitely an anti-China sentiment that I think some politicians are also spewing, and it definitely can link back to the hate crimes now. But I think the issue is that now that China is a stronger geopolitical power, I think that a lot of other countries are feeling really threatened by that, and so they are acting out.
I think it's really bad, like really bad. It has never gone that bad. When I was back in the States, just like 2 years ago, it was nothing like that. You walk on the streets and you feel safe. Right now, I feel like a lot of people walk on the street and they don't feel safe, especially being Asian. You will feel that, am I gonna get stabbed today, or am I gonna get shot today, or if I get beat up by some people, or like, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I supposed to protect myself? Am I gonna fight back? There's a lot of questions for that. So I think it's really bad right now.
I don't necessarily think that all of a sudden people who are not racist are going to be racist because truly because of the virus, right? Meaning, I think it's an easy reason to be angry. And the blame has to go someplace. But none of that makes any sense. And none of it is rational. But that's sort of the nature of I think, discrimination, right? It's an emotional thing, not a rational thing.
I feel Asian racism, because of COVID, has been brought to light, and it's in the media, and people are actually dealing with it and making comments, or even there's stories about it. But actually, for me, it's existed for a really long time in very subtle ways, and sometimes people just overlook it. I think when I was younger, it definitely, when I went to certain classes, when it was primarily most of my classmates were white, I did feel at a disadvantage. I felt at the same level or given the opportunities, I wouldn't get the chance like someone else would.
The conflict between China and U.S. it's going to continue, but I think it should only continue from the political landscape. I think people in general should not make assumptions based off what media tells them. They should go out and read a book or go online or talk to your friends that live across the world. But we tend to just steer away from day-to-day mass society culture, and we head to the headlines. We go to the media, we go to the news, clickbait articles, and we'll digest any information that they're willing to tell us.
How much awareness do you think there is in China about the anti-Asian hate crime issues?
Yeah, there is a bit of awareness in China. It's this portrayal of, like America gone wrong, right? Like I think Chinese media is always happy to portray, negativity in the U.S. and vice versa, right?
And do you think like Chinese people can relate to this problem that the Asian Americans are facing in America?
I don't think so. Not at all. No. They actually would. I don't know, because I don't want to represent 1.3 billion people, but in my personal view, they would say it is something you have asked for when you decide to leave China.
There's a conversation group on Zhihu, which is something like Quora, the website, and on that website, people were talking about this. I saw a question about, do Chinese people care about those Chinese American people in America who's being discriminated? And some very popular answers, let's say, no, we don't give a shit. They're not Chinese. They're American citizens, and they're having their own problem, their own country. We care about them, and we worry about them because we're nice people, not because they're Chinese American or whatever. Simply because we care about the normal people's life, those well-being. But it's not because they're Chinese or whatever. They're American. They're not one of us.
So do you see yourself going back to live in the U.S. at some point in the near future?
Maybe for vacation. And definitely for vacation, actually. Yeah, because I still have many friends over there.
Due to career reasons, I might be in China for a little while longer, but recent events have made me wonder if I even want to go back, because my life is actually pretty good here in China, and to kind of go back to an environment where it's not very friendly to Asian Americans, I think I'd have to think about it.
I mean, it doesn't look likely in the short term, right? I mean, my business is here and my life is here. Of course, I have family back there, and my children will be going back there for school. So I will always go back. I think just during COVID, it's been a little bit more tricky.
What do you think the U.S. as a country can do, if any, to help address these anti-Asian hate crimes?
I think the very useful way is that you have successful figures that come from Asian American backgrounds. I think our vice president is a great example, and constantly talking about her as a descent of South Asian as well as an African American. This is perfect.
Education can help, and also I think the younger generation in the U.S. are less likely to be racist. I think it's getting better in the U.S. actually, but people like who are educated or successful in the U.S., I don't think they will be like racist.
I think the U.S. needs to really increase the amount of education that goes into schools regarding Asian Americans and the history, and I mean, textbooks could be one-sided too, Education on racism, education on culture, global culture, not just one culture like United States culture. I think it needs to be expanded on in the education system.
I have very little faith in Congress, as do most Americans actually. I think Congress has like a 13% approval rate. I think cultural institutions actually have a lot more influence and a lot more power, right? Like the media, right? Like Hollywood. I think those institutions actually can put more Asians, in the spotlight to really tell more Asian American stories. I think those cultural institutions really have a lot more sway in the kind of American zeitgeist, I would say. Historically, we have this perception of being more passive as a group, whether it's Chinese Americans or Asian Americans, and I think it's time to shake off that label and really get out there and do more, right? Andrew Yang is running for mayor of New York. I'm really excited about his candidacy, and it's supporting, Asian Americans in politics. It's supporting Asian Americans in society and media and in popular culture, and it's really making our voices heard and engaging in tough conversations. And not playing the victim card, I would say. right? Like we are here. We need to be heard, you know, and we are strong.